Justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice people demand. Right to life and security. Oh, what a Georgia. Oh, what a peace. How great this country could be. Respecting your rights. Respecting human rights. What a wonderful nation this could be. Out of the moon, I want in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race, or religion. We not tolerate discrimination. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, people demand. Right to life and security. What a Georgia, what a peace. How great this country could be. Respecting your rights.
All right, happy Monday to our listeners. Thank you so much for joining today's Let's Start Justice on Nationwide. Happy to be here with you. My name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director of JFJ. And we're not in studio today. We are joining you remotely. So just to kick things off, by the way, I'm alone today because Jade Williams, our policy research and advocacy specialist, she is actually in doing a training today, as she was last week, and as she will be doing again next week with law enforcement officers here in Kingston. So I'm flying solo in having today's discussion. So we're going to be discussing a survey that was launched last week, and that survey was done in receipt of funding from the European Union, and it is to fund a 3-year project that we have going with the EU that ends this year, December, and a sub-grant was given to the Micah Foundation. So this survey reflects co-publishing of the findings, and it is the 2025 Citizens' Rights, Roles, Responsibilities, and Practices Survey. So we're going to delve a little bit deeper into the findings, as well as have some conversations in a little while on the findings, just to get a sense of is it reflective of what is happening in the communities, the trust levels, awareness of human rights, and so on. But before we get into the findings, which I will give you a very brief overview, just to highlight our Did You Know for today, and it is taken from the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, Section 19, and it speaks to our right to redress. So if you or someone believes that their constitutional rights have been violated, are currently violated, or might be violated, you can go to the Supreme Court and ask the court to fix the problem, even if you can take some other legal action. Now, the Constitution does allow for what we call public interest litigation. So JFJ has in the past, for example, filed constitutional challenges. There is one that is currently being undertaken in partnership with Stand Up for Jamaica and the Public Law Chambers on behalf of mentally ill persons who are incarcerated, from Governor General's pleasure to the court's pleasure, but incarcerated for some 4 decades. For example, you remember George Williams, you remember others who have not had their release, notwithstanding the fact that even if they were tried ordinarily based on the crime that they committed, they would have been released if they were able-minded. So a public or civic organization, once the courts give you permission based on your legal standing and so on, can also bring a case like the one I mentioned just now to the Supreme Court on behalf of affected people and ask the court to declare that a law or the government action is actually violating one's constitutional right. So important piece of right to redress. And by the way, this was expanded in the year that you're about to answer for the trivia question that I am going to be highlighting. So, the trivia question for today: in which year did the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedom come into force? In which year did the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedom come into force? First correct answer across our platforms win. Now, there is some public discourse currently on JFJ, which I will not address. My board will address it in short order. So you can watch out for a release from the organization in a bit. So let me go straight into the substantive topic for today. And just to indicate that we are going to be joined by Horace Levy, former board member and former executive director of JFJ, as well as Mr. David Allen, who is a social commentator and someone who is quite au fait with communities that have historically been under heavy policing. Just going to get their reactions to the survey findings. But to get into it for today. So let me start by indicating that the survey was conducted within 10 communities in the Kingston area, and those communities were deliberately chosen. One, because we had conducted a survey in 2015 in some of these communities, and you wanted to get a sense of has anything changed. So it's what you call a longitudinal study. You want to get a sense of what people think about their rights, their responsibilities, their trust in institutions, what people think about jungle justice. If it is that they have their rights violated, what types of rights violations have they experienced and how have they been reporting? So the communities that were chosen include Tivoli Gardens, Hannahtown, Mountain View, Waterhouse, Rosetown, Whitfield Town, McIntyreville, Dunkirk, Trenchtown. We had engaged 8 communities, I believe, in 2015, and we added 2. And just to note, I believe 1 or 2 of the other communities that we had engaged in 2015, because of the high levels of crime at the time, it was not safe for the researchers to go in. So 2 new communities added include Augusttown and Denhamtown. So you realize it's quite centered in the urban Kingston areas, and it didn't go outside of Kingston. So that's a limitation, just to keep things in perspective in terms of the communities that were engaged. So in terms of the findings now, 305 citizens were surveyed, and we also did some focus group discussions through the Micro Foundation, its Institute of Research of Technological and Educational Institute. I may not have gotten the name correctly there. But anyway, in moving along, if we can just put up for the viewers the awareness of rights image, so you can follow me as I speak quickly. So we see where among those surveyed there were high levels of rights awareness. So people are au fait with what their rights are. So 61% of those who were surveyed have high levels of rights awareness. 31.5% have medium awareness levels, that is. And we're seeing where 7% have low awareness. So that's a good thing. A majority of those who were surveyed have high levels of awareness of their human rights. And we're seeing where females have slightly higher awareness of their rights compared to men, where among females, 66% have high levels of awareness compared to 56% among men. Age group is important and educational levels. So we see high awareness, particularly among the 16 to 24 year group, that 68% of them having high levels of awareness. And among the age group of over 55 years, there is high levels of awareness as well, where 71% have high levels of awareness. So it's heartening to see the awareness levels. However, when you start the discussions in the focus groups, What it says, though, is that even though people are aware of their rights, they say that the rights are paper based. So, in other words, it just sounds good on paper. We know that them say on paper that we have these constitutional rights, but in real life, we in the inner city communities, we are not seeing that we are entitled to those rights. So the findings suggest that people also see the rights as conditional. So in other words, the more money you have, the more rights you have. Where you live, the more rights you have. Your skin color, who you know, and so on will determine how much you are able to realize your rights. So that is something for us to watch. If we shift to awareness of roles and responsibilities, then and when we talk about roles of responsibilities, we're thinking about people who are aware of the need to vote, the need to participate in civic duties, such as jury duty and so on. So again, that has high levels of awareness overall, where 70% of the citizens say that they have high awareness of their roles and responsibilities, 26% was moderate, and 11% was low. But again, that requires us to delve a little bit deeper in what that means. People note that they are aware of their civic responsibilities, but when you start listening into what the focus group discussion said, people said that they do duties out of what they call governance survival. So in other words, because the state is not doing what the state ought to, I will do what I must to ensure that my community is kept safe and my community is kept in a way that is livable for us. So they will clean the gullies just out of what they call governance survival because the state is not acting in the way that the state ought to. This is the feedback from those who were surveyed. It was important to note as well that people believe that they should participate in the process of mentoring young people, keeping the children safe, because they have to do what they must for the new generation of citizens growing up in their communities. So I just want to plug some of those things. I think let us just take the break now and then I go into trust in institutions, sharing that, and human rights violation and the reporting practices. So let's take the break and then we pick up.
New quartz and granite now in stock at Exotic Stone Creation. Discover the widest selection of premium stone slabs in Jamaica with massive sales for every room and building size. From kitchens and cabinets to bathrooms and home decor, move beyond the ordinary with Jamaica's trusted source for premium stone surfaces. Enjoy 10% off store-wide. Visit Exotic Stone Creation in Kingston at 284 Spanish Town Road or Montego Bay at shop number 2 Fairview Plaza. Call 876-933-1111 or 876-953-6171.
If you love the vibes, the laughs, and the real talk, then you're one of us. Don't just listen, belong. Join the nationwide 90FM Family Club on Patreon.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We are discussing the findings of a survey that was done in partnership with the Micah Foundation, the Citizens' Rights, Roles, Responsibilities and Practices Survey. Quite a lengthy name. But we are now discussing trust in institutions. All right. So what we find emerging globally is that there are low trust levels in formal institutions generally. So this survey findings, it's nothing new, but let's delve into it and see whether or not we agree or if there's any reason for alarm. Now, when we look at the findings, and I hope you're seeing the slide here on trust in the on the YouTube platform. Only 21% of citizens that we surveyed have high trust levels. Then 44% have moderate trust levels, and 24% have low trust levels. And when you start, zooming in a little bit on the institutions that they trust, I think unsurprisingly, you see the church emerging as the most trusted institution at 63%. JFJ, we are noted here at 42%, Indicom at 39%, the legal system at 33%, the government at 28%, the police at 26% trust levels. I want to say this as well, that even though this survey was done in 10 communities among 300 citizens, I want to quickly mention the LAPOP survey, that's the Latin American Public Opinion Poll, that is done nationally. And what that survey says is that 46% of Jamaicans in 2023 had trust in the judiciary, and 25% had trust in the police in 2023, which was a decline from the previous year. By the way, the LAPOP, though done in 2023, was released in 2024. JFJ, we also did another research, my apologies, in 2023, and that was done in other communities like in Westmoreland and so on. And what you found was that there was a higher trust in the soldiers compared to the police. So we're seeing where generally the trust levels in institutions are not high, and that is something for all of us to take note of. As I said on Nationwide a couple of evenings ago, while the restorative justice centers were not listed in the survey from which people could choose, you saw the restorative justice centers coming up a lot, and people are saying that they trust the RJ centers, which means that is a good news for the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. That means that more needs to go in. I don't want to go into my thoughts too much here, but just to share the findings. Why are people not trusting the institutions, or why they trust the church more? One, they see the church as offering moral guidance, clarity, counseling. The trust levels for JFJ and Indicom neck and neck there, but people say that these organizations were slow to respond, even though we're well intended, and perhaps based on our own resources, we're not able to give them the type of redress that they would like. And you see people saying that they prefer to report now to family members. Only 26% saying that they were interested in reporting to the police. 21% said that they confronted the abuser directly. So of the 48% of respondents who reported knowing where to get help, only 67 or 22% actually said that, well, 67, my apologies, let me back up. Of the 48% or 148 respondents who said that they knew where to get help, 67 respondents or 22% did nothing about it. So let me clarify there. In terms of the top human rights violations that were experienced, 34% experienced domestic violence by parents, siblings, and household members. 22% physical violence by the police, and 22% address-based employment discrimination. So in other words, mommy, daddy, auntie, cousin within the domestic setting are the ones who are perpetrating what you call citizen against citizen violence. Domestic violence, that is a big issue. Unfortunately, people being dosed with acid and fire, being lit ablaze and so on, being stabbed within the domestic setting. These are the domestic violence matters that you see coming out. The physical violence by the police, and by the way, those within the age group 16 to 24 are the ones likely to experience these rights violation and address-based discrimination, also what people experience. So if you remember Itana's song, for example, you see it coming to fore in the survey. All right. So that is a survey finding in a snapshot. So let us get into the discussion with our guest. And we are joined by Mr. Horace Levy, former executive director of JFJ, still a JFJ board member, not board member, member of the organization, my apologies. And do we also have Mr. Allen on? Mr. Levy, Mr. Allen?
Hello. Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good afternoon to you both.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Levy, let me start with you. I just gave a snapshot of the findings. Anything jump out at you in terms of the levels of rights awareness, trust levels, anything?
No, nothing special. No, very accurate.
Mr. Levy?
Yes, I'm saying nothing special jumped out at me, no.
Okay. Mr. Allen, anything for you jumped out? Okay, we're not hearing Mr. Allen. So, Mr. Levy, let's just continue with you. One of the things we found in the survey compared to 2015 was that there was an increase in the number of citizens who are aware of their human rights. However, you see where the trust levels generally in institutions are not where it needs to be. Only 21% have high trust levels. So I think there's a disconnect between being aware of your rights, the reporting practices are not good, and then the trust levels are generally moderate to low. What do you make of that specifically?
Well, it's not new that trust is low. What is somewhat new is the high level of awareness of rights, and I think organizations like JFK should be congratulated as having contributed to that raising of that awareness of people's awareness of rights. To my mind, the basic problem is that a large number of citizens don't feel included. They feel excluded. And as long as they have this sense of exclusion, there can't be any trust. So then, if they don't feel included in the hospitals when they go for care, if even at the pre-primary level, starting school for the first time, their language is rejected and they're not learning in Jamaican, in Patois, that's rejection. That's being excluded from society. Mm-hmm. And it's this exclusion, this not being included, which turns people against one another and against the society, against the government, and so on. So until we can fix that, then all the rest is just talk. Mm-hmm. That's my bit for the day.
Yes. And in terms of the trust levels, Mr. Levy, you have been working in communities for years now. Your experience is unmatched, really. What do you think can be done differently or perhaps enhanced to improve the trust levels of citizens, especially within these communities, of the state and its agencies?
In the case of the police, it's clear that some of the methods they use are not acceptable. The number of people being killed by police, that's not likely to build trust, is it? I don't think it is. So until something like that is changed, then we cannot expect there will be trust. Indicom is complaining that the police force is doing its own investigation instead of referring things to Indicom. And this is a clear violation of the law and the Constitution. They should not be doing this.
You're referring to the recent matter where Indicom had to issue a press release, just for clarity. If you could just clarify for the listeners what you're referring to.
Well, I'm referring to Indicom saying that the police force is conducting investigations independently instead of referring matters to Indicom. So they're referring cases to Indicom for its investigation. It's not to exclude the police from doing investigation, but its primary task, its first step, is to refer to Indicom and bring Indicom into the picture. This will inspire trust from people because Indicom has a higher rating of trust than the police force. So, things like that.
That they weren't circumventing Indicom, but it's just how the investigation unfolded based on what they said in their release.
What's that? I'm not hearing you.
No, I was just providing context for the listeners that the JCF had provided clarity in a release that they weren't circumventing Indicom, but it was just the nature of how that particular investigation unfolded. That's what they said in a release.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. But Indicom's complaint still stands. Anyway, until the JCF sorts out its relationship with Indicom, then trust is undermined. Mm-hmm. Don't you agree?
No, I think both organizations should work together, certainly. All organizations, and I think some of the inflammatory comments certainly do not help with that type of trust levels that are needed because one undermines the other, whether unintentionally or otherwise. But yes.
We let the police force begin to use on its planned operations volume and mass cameras. You know, up to now they haven't done this. In spite of multiple talk, and in spite of the fact they have a certain number of cameras, not enough perhaps, but enough to equip those going out and planned operations. Mm-hmm. And that's something that would inspire trust. Right?
You know, one of the things that the citizens said, Mr. Levy, in this survey is that two things I jumped out at me. That they trust the police that are from the area, who grew up in the area, and that but it's the ones that are not from the area, what they call the uptown areas, are the ones perpetrating some of the rights violation. That was one comment. The other comment is that there are trust levels in some police officers, but it is the system that they don't trust. The wider JCF, according to some, that they don't trust. So those were two comments that jumped out at me. And then the third is that within the communities, they indicated that they feel like they're being under police watch every day as they wake up. They feel like they're in jail. I just wanted to respond to that, but we have to take the break. So please think on it and then share your perspectives on those comments that came out of the focus group discussions.
Hey my peeps, get this on the regular. Your HIV status if you consider. The least you ever test once a year. Just 15 minutes and your status clear. Cause it might not show up on your timeline and you learn too late so you're out of time. A progressive future, mandatory. Real long life, our story. You hear?
Remember, update your status in a real life. Do a HIV test today.
Just 15 minutes and your status clear. Real long life, our story. Real long life with a youth coming from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
You've stood with us through every headline and every difficult moment. The Family Club is how we keep this going strong. Together, join the nationwide 90 FM Family Club now on Patreon.
You may have been hearing the teasers. Now it's official. Beginning Monday, February 9, 2026, Nationwide News Network launches something special. The Nationwide Family Club, exclusively on Patreon.
With the Family Club, members get early access to our documentaries before anyone else. Some of your favorite segments, including Cliff Says, What's on My Mind, Cover Story, and others, will now be a click away inside the Family Club. There are 3 tiers of membership. First, Bronze, the Family Insider, behind-the-scenes access, Monday motivational videos, members-only chats, and on-air birthdays and anniversary shoutouts.
Second, Silver, Nationwide VIP. Breaking news alerts, exclusive documentaries, quizzes, personal milestones celebrated on air, and weekly family roll call mentions. Oh, and for our biggest supporters,
our gold category, elite listener, full archive access, early releases, private studio tours, live show experiences, personalized birthday videos, and exclusive live streams. From historic election coverage to lifetime, impact, Jamaican milestones, and rare archive content. This is Nationwide like you've never seen it before. The Nationwide Family Club, coming to you February 9, 2026 on Patreon.
Join the family, support Nationwide 90 FM, the station that informs, entertains, and educates. Visit patreon.com/Nationwide News Network. That's patreon.com/Nationwide News Network. Nationwide Family Club, where you are family, because we see you as family.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We are here with Horace Levy, and we're just discussing survey findings from a survey that was conducted in partnership with the Michael Foundation, conducted by Michael through its Institute of Research with funding from JFJ. Before the break, Mr. Levy, I was just posing a question to you that citizens in the survey responded that every day they wake up, they feel like they're in jail. You see where trust levels may be higher among police officers that are from the community, or saying that there's trust levels with particular officers, but there's a general low trust of the institution itself or the system. What do you make of that? Mr. Levy? I'm not hearing Mr. Levy. I'm not sure what's happening. All right, until we get Mr. Levy back, just to put some other of the findings into perspective for our listeners, quite interesting. So one of the things that jumped out at me when I was reading the report from Michael was the matter of jungle justice. So that is when citizens will take things up in their own hands and get justice because of perhaps the low trust levels in the institution. So in the survey, it said that 51% of the respondents rejected jungle justice, and which is a significant increase compared to 2015, where it stood at 31% of citizens rejecting jungle justice, and I found that to be good improvement over the years when you talk about how citizens feel about, taking the law up in their own hands and so on. So I found that quite instructive. And the other thing was that 51% agreed that the government manages the country on their behalf, and that is still 49% of citizens believing that the government is not acting on their behalf or in their best interest. So it means that we do have some more work to do when you look at the survey findings in that light. Do we have Mr. Levy back on with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, Hello. Mr. Levy. Not sure if you were hearing some of what I was sharing, or the comment or the question that I asked before about, how people feel about the heavy policing in the communities.
Well, let me just comment on your previous point about the improved attitude towards jungle justice, that people are less inclined to jump to jungle justice now than they were before. That's a tremendous piece of forward movement. What it means, really, is that they are more inclined to rely on the police to get them justice. So there's an improvement in their trust in the police. And I think that's a very positive thing. It's a very real thing and an improvement. It shows that there's more to further steps to take in regard to the trust. But clearly, some improvement, some marked improvement in trust has taken place. What is needed now is for the JCF to build the trust by using the body-worn cameras, by cutting down on these fatalities at their own hands, and that kind of thing. So let's see improvement in that regard. Let's see them relating better to Indicom and building up their relationship with Indicom better. So these are steps the police have to take in order to still improve their position, which has improved. And I want to congratulate them for what has already taken place, but urge them, particularly in regard to police fatalities, to do something about that. That's really critical. And it will considerably improve trust in the police force if they do something about the body-worn cameras and their relationship with Indicom. So let's see them take some action in those regards. With regard to communities feeling they're being watched, well, clearly that kind of watching is not the friendly kind of watching that they're complaining about. Yes. If they felt they were being guarded in a way that was acceptable, they wouldn't complain about being watched. But the watching is being done by police who are not friendly to them, who are not of their own kind, and so on. They're foreign police in a sense. Yes. And it's that which makes the watching objectionable. So yes. Let's see the police do something about that.
I want to read a paragraph from the report, Mr. Levy and listeners. Trauma from the 2010 Tivoli Gardens incursion and earlier political violence was not recalled as history, but as operational memory. In Trenchtown, one resident explained, "Our parents teach we for watch how we talk." In Denham Town, another admitted, "Me tired for always watch me back." So just to say that other similar comments came from the focus group discussion, wherein children are being socialized not to just be respectful of law enforcement, but compliant because of fear that if you question or talk back in any way, you may very well see loss of life. What do you make of that?
Well, you see, talking back, this is, it's an attitude on the part of some police not all, thankfully. But older people sometimes, it's not just police, but older citizens and relatives don't allow younger ones to, quote unquote, talk back. Well, of course, that's a clear disrespect for younger people who have voices too and feelings and rights and so on, and should be respected. And when police object to being talked back, it's because there's a criticism of them involved, and they're not prepared to accept criticism. That's an attitude which has to change, doesn't it? You have to be open to being criticized. And if there are police who are not open to being criticized, that's got to be corrected. And the talk back business is really reflecting that side of the matter.
Yeah. We mentioned about trust in the police, but just to shift gears a little, in terms of trust in the justice system and the legal system, the media, that is also quite low, based on the findings in the research. So in other words, people are of the view that only election time the politicians will come with music and food. Then they have to survey. Those are the comments. Some say justice expensive. If you have money, or if you don't have no money, you lose even your right. Only rich people get justice. And that is quite similar with the LAPOP survey, where there's low trust levels in the institution, wherein there is a sentiment among citizens. Why report these infractions or rights violations or anything if it is that justice is not for all? Based on your experience, what can be done to perhaps change that mindset, Mr. Levy?
Well, it can be changed, that mindset, by a justice system which is more quick to bring cases from lower income people forward, have them dealt with more promptly, and appeals to be processed again more speedily. All of that has to, people have to see it, They have a hard time getting their cases sometimes heard, or they're roughly treated in some police stations, and their matters not handled with the courtesy and celerity that they should be. So, all of that, there's room for improvement. I mean, there has been some improvement already. There's no doubt. I mean, the backlog of cases has dropped dramatically in parish courts. We've seen the data released by the Chief Justice, and we applaud that. So the level of backlog is not by any means as high as it used to be. But there is still room for improvement, and particularly with regard to the cases of lower income people who, as the complaint goes, don't see their cases being dealt with because they ain't got no money and they can't afford the expensive lawyer. All of this has to do too with not making use of the Caribbean Court of Justice and relying on the Privy Council, because clearly you have to have a lot of money to access the Privy Council, or you have to rely on the kindness of a few British lawyers to carry your case for you. So, but that is something which, again, the government has to move on. I mean, this government is not only tardy, it's being really objectionable in its failure to move on the matter of the ultimate course of justice. So until they begin to move on that, then, poor people will continue to see themselves as slighted, as rejected, as excluded, which is my starting point.
Yeah. All right. Any final words from you, Mr. Levy, before we wrap up with the discussion?
Well, my final word really is that unfortunately I am not on the ground as I used to be, and so I am not in a position to really pick up on a lot of points that have come up. So I apologize for that. But I think that the work that the survey has done, and the people like yourselves who are on the ground more than I am, is highly commendable. And I thank you very much for the work you're doing.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Levy. I appreciate you always. That was Horace Levy, and I have to say, former executive director of JFJ, and someone who's quite familiar with inner city community work, rights awareness, violence prevention, and the work of criminology, the field. Thank you so much, Mr. Levy. Always. We take the break.
The news cycle doesn't end on Friday. It needs perspective. That's why every Sunday at midday, Nationwide 90 FM presents The Week That Was. A clear, informed review of the top stories that shaped the past week, what really mattered and what lies ahead. No noise, no theatrics, just analysis, context, and clarity. The Week That Was. Sundays at 12 p.m. Understand the news before the week begins. Only on Nationwide 90 FM, a new revolution in media.
We love showing you the fun side of Jamaica. New places, good food, real vibes, and pure adventure.
Sweet Jamaica, we not left ya.
If you enjoy exploring with us, come closer. Join the Nationwide 90 FM Family Club today on Patreon.
We not left ya. Ain't nothing like this sweet cool breeze a jam down.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. I just want to share some more snippets from the survey by reading some elements of the findings. All right, so just to continue the conversation here, where was I? On the matter of crime reporting, one of the things that jumped out is there was a tension between the moral obligation and the personal safety of citizens in sharing and reporting on crime in their community, and that was interesting to hear. So, for example, crime reporting was said to be conditional, wherein it depended on what is seen. So, in other words, people were of the view that there is not the trust levels in the institutions to keep what they say as conditional, as confidential. My apologies. So, in other words, I don't trust, if I were to report to the institutions, the police in this respect, that whatever I say would be kept in confidence. So, therefore, people said that they would not be reporting on anything that they witnessed regarding gang violence or any gang-related homicide. People indicated, however, or they drew a line when it came to child abuse matters. So in other words, we can't stop and watch a young picnic be abused and don't report it. So that is where people drew the line. The moral line was clearly drawn. If a child was being abused in any extreme way, then people are more compelled to report in that respect. if they witnessed, for example, a woman, and they made the distinction known, a woman being abused to an extreme level, then they are so minded to report those incidents to law enforcement, or at the very least intervene on behalf of the woman or the child. But again, in terms of reporting otherwise, when it comes to gang-related matters, that was no. In fact, the researchers wrote in the report that when it came to gang-related violence, the phrase informer for dead, see and blind, hear and deaf, those phrases were repeated across every single communities in the focus group discussions that were had. So that is something for us to look at. How can we strengthen the confidentiality within the force, or the perceived levels of low confidentiality? That is something we need to strengthen. The matter of the infrastructure of the police stations also were flagged as areas that didn't really, instill much confidence that when you're reporting on certain matters, it will be kept in confidence. And we know JCF is doing extraordinarily good work in this respect. You see the Wanted Wednesdays coming out. Crime Stop continues to do very good work. How do we strengthen and reduce the perception levels that are low? So the community intervention is what we believe ought to be strengthened. For example, each Saturday, JFJ, we joined the Domestic Violence Intervention Center led by Jacqueline Delon. We were out in St. Elizabeth on Saturday, and we will be out with the JCF team again this Saturday, just to indicate that notwithstanding public commentary at times, the organization continues to work with the force in this respect. And as we speak about the domestic violence intervention centers, that issue of domestic violence is something that we also need to look into. So in the survey, and I'm reading some of the comments here that were captured in the focus group discussion on domestic violence. And I want us to look at domestic violence in two ways, based on the framing of the survey question. It asked about domestic violence experience within the household. So that may very well also include your partner within your household, but it may include other family members. So, for example, a parent being violent towards a child, an uncle, especially in what you call tenement yard or big yard families, where multiple people live in the same yard. You see domestic violence in terms of dispute among and between family members. That was framed differently from the question of domestic violence committed within intimate partner violence situation. So when you look at domestic violence within the household, you saw where men experience domestic violence within the household at a larger level or degree, rather, compared to women. And that is instructive, right? So men experience domestic violence within the household settings a little bit more compared to women. When you look at intimate partner violence, though, notwithstanding the article, and we were happy for the coverage, but the headline by the Gleaner was a little bit misleading when it spoke to intimate partner violence, that men were experiencing it more. So the survey showed that I believe 33 men experience intimate partner violence by their female partners compared to 31 women. So even though quantitatively it's more, when you look at the subgroup of how many men versus women we actually surveyed, you found that it was neck and neck. It was 21% within the group of men, 21% within the group of women who experience intimate partner violence by their partner. So man by woman, woman by man, right? But it's still alarming, because what it also said in the focus group discussion was that men were fearful of reporting that they were experiencing violence being meted out to them by their female partner. Because when they go to the police station to report, according to the men, they are laughed out of the police station, right? So we see where domestic violence is something that's continues to be alarming, and it is something that we really do need to pay some attention to, because we see where the homicide rates in Jamaica, it's decreasing, but you see more domestic violence situations that are alarming. And the police has indicated that they will be strengthening their response. And we have already seen some of it. You have more domestic violence intervention centers. The police, they're being trained by agencies such as JFJ and others to better respond in what we call a trauma-centered response, knowing how to take statement from witnesses or those who are reporting on domestic violence and that type of abuse that has taken shape. And with that in mind, just keep in sharp focus that the Joint Select Committee on the Domestic Violence Act, they have reconvened. Remember, they convened the committee, when was it? In 2025, they only met twice, and then an election was held months after. So we're happy that that Joint Select Committee has reconvened, and they are going through the Domestic Violence Act with what ought to be a comprehensive review, but it must be concluded in a timely manner. It shouldn't be like the last time where it was convened, only 2 or so meetings held, then nothing. We want to ensure that we have a comprehensive review of the Domestic Violence Act, because I'm not sure if you're aware, but the Domestic Violence Act, for example, it doesn't even define what is domestic violence. So you see that even the very definition of domestic violence needs to be included, so the police can better know how to respond. The courts will be better informed in terms of meting out and ensuring that justice is realized for complainants. So a lot of work to be done, but please keep this issue in our thoughts, in our consciousness as we have the discussions on rights violation. And, you know, as we were going through the findings, I just want to encourage listeners that let us not berate people based on where they live. Presumption of innocence is important. And this is how people feel, that they are simply labeled based on their address. I always say that, listen, as Jamaicans, we have to check our social consciousness. We can understand systemic racism in America and join with the Black Lives movement, Black Lives Matter movement in the United States. We can understand George Floyd. But when it comes to our own Jamaican brothers and sisters, once they're from the inner city, everybody a criminal. I think we have to check our consciousness and our view and our biases and how much we discriminate against people based on their address. So just a food for thought as we challenge some of those misconceptions and biases that we have as citizens, and the privilege that we have based on where we live and the amount of money we earn and the education that we have and so on. All right, that's where we have to leave it. But the trivia, the correct answer for today is 2011. That's the correct answer in terms of when the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms came into effect. And I'm not seeing a winner here, so we will post it on our social media page, and the winner will so be announced there. All right? Have a good rest of Monday, and thank you so much for tuning in. Well, Let's Start Justice. My name is Mikel Jackson. Oh, news commentator, you won again this week. All right? Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your company. And news commentator as a long-standing winner. Right? You already know the WhatsApp number that you're expected to send your WhatsApp to claim your prize. I appreciate you all. Have a blessed rest of Monday.
Justice for all, justice under the law, justice Jamaica demand, right to life, right to liberty. Out of the moon, I want in Jamaica, Jamaica. I get a better place for the boys and girls. Created the creator. equal rights and opportunities, no unlawful detention, and police brutalization, class, gender, race, or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or JamaicансForJustice.org.
The people's champion.
Jamaica, we have been tested before, and every time we rise. Together, we will rebuild stronger, safer, and united. Hope lives here. The time by the office of the Prime Minister is
2 minutes after 2.
This station raised me. It gave me a voice. And if Nationwide has ever meant something to you,